Hello, beautiful students, and welcome to Note Card 66. It's been a minute. We are going to talk about integrating absolute value today, which we already kind of touched on in class, but we're going to cement this into our notes. So grab your note card, and here we go. So when we talked about absolute value in class, we reviewed that the parent function for absolute value is like a V that goes at a straight line both of those directions. This one should be whoop, like this. So we've got the graph of negative x, right? We've got a slope of -1, and we've got the graph of positive x going this way, okay? So what we talked about is instead of thinking about this as one function, splitting it in half and thinking about this is a piece and this is a piece, okay? And we also talked about how this graph, when we're talking about the area between the graph and the x-axis, makes a really nice shape when you calculate underneath it, which is a triangle. And we reviewed that the area of a triangle is 1/2 base times height. Okay, so we're going to use those two ideas today in order to integrate absolute value functions. Okay, so let's get ready for our first example. So here's our first example. We want to take the integral of this function here, the absolute value of x minus 3, from 1 to 4, so those are my bounds. And so in order to do this, we're going to follow a couple of steps. Okay, so our first step is going to be to find the zeros. Okay, we want to find the zeros to figure out what this graph looks like. Or you can use your knowledge of the parent function and use, your h and k and moving things around. Okay, so we're going to find the zeros, we're going to draw the graph, and then we're going to calculate the area. Easy peasy. Here we go. So my graph, I know the parent function is a v, and this -3 means that it moved to the right 3. Remember, we have the opposite when it's on the inside. Or you can think about calculating the zeros, right? Which would be if I plug in 3, that would make this equal to 0. So I know that I have this, and then nothing is happening over here to stretch my function, so I must have the same slope going up, which is a slope of 1, and then I have the same slope going this way, okay? Now, I am going to find my area. So I want from 1 to 4, so I care about from here to, so I'm gonna have this triangle, and then this is 1, 2, 3, 4, this little triangle here, right? So now I can calculate. I've got 1/2, I'll do my first one here. 1/2, my base was 2. My height is 2 as well. So I have 1/2 of 2 times 2, which is just 2. So that is the area of this first triangle here. This next one is 1/2 times 1 times 1, which would give me 1/2. Both of those are going to get added together to give me 2.5, or we know that that is equal to 5/2, and we calculated area, so we're going to say units squared. And there is our answer for example 1. All right, example 2, we are taking the integral, or finding the area under the curve from 0 to 2 of 2x minus 1 dx. So I am going to, if I'm not sure what my parent function looks like, this is a great time to just use a table. So I want to figure out what 0 is, what 1 would be, and what 2 would be, right? And those are my bounds, so I can stop there, right? So when x is 0, I get 0 minus 1, that would be positive 1. So I'm going to have a point at 0, 1. Then I plug in 1, I'm at 2 minus 1, that's also 1. And then my point at 2 would be 4 minus 1, which would be 3. So at 2, I have 1, 2, 3. There we go. So, and then I know that that makes sense because 1/2 is what would make this 0, so I must have 1/2 there, and it must be going like this. Okay? So my two triangles are this little itty bitty guy right here, and then this triangle here. So I'm going to use my area equals 1/2 base times height. So of the first one, I've got 1/2. The base is 1/2. The height is 1. Right, and my base was 1/2 because that's where that 0 hit, right? Which would give me 1/4. So the area of my tiny triangle is 1/4. And then of my next one would be my 1/2. My base is going from 1/2 to 2, so that must be 1 1/2 or 3/2. And then my height I knew was, oops, I didn't write that on my table, but I knew that that should have been 3. So I would get multiply across the top. 1 times 3 would be 9 over, multiply the bottoms, 9 over 4. I want to add these two areas, so I would have 9 over 4 plus 1 over 4, which would give me 10 over 4, and I did area, so it's units squared. There is my answer for number 2.